Hello and welcome. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Mike, and this video is part of a larger series called Philosophy 101. I know, not a very exciting or imaginative name, but still, that's what we're working with. And the purpose of this series of videos is to not only give you an introduction to philosophy and its ideas and thinkers and so on, but to provide you with the tools so that you can actively engage in the act of philosophy. So this video is part of a subsection of that series where we are exploring logic and reasoning and critical thinking and all of that good stuff. So in the last video we explored formal logic, focusing on logical operators and truth tables, which are wonderful tools. So today we're shifting our attention to informal logic and identifying logical fallacies, common errors in reasoning that weaken arguments, basically. Spotting fallacies is a critical skill, whether you're analyzing debates, reading news, or trying to build your own arguments. And in fact, it's a critical skill in our day-to-day conversations, because as you'll see when we go through this, people have a tendency to embed logical fallacies into a lot of our sort of natural speech. So it helps us to untangle the mess, as it were. So the agenda for this video is fairly simple, as it hopefully is for each video. So we're going to start by looking at what are logical fallacies. And then we are going to get to grips with and get our heads around some of the common fallacies in reasoning. And then from there, we're going to move on and attempt to analyze some real world examples. And finally, we are going to have a little practice at identifying fallacies. So let's get into it. What are logical fallacies? Well, logical fallacies are mistakes in reasoning that make an argument invalid or unsound. They often seem convincing at first, which is why they're so common in persuasive writing, advertising, and political debates. So why would we even want to study fallacies? Well, what's the benefit? What value does it give us to be able to identify and understand these logical fallacies? Well, there's lots of reasons. So I'm only going to go through 3 with you, but there are many, many more. So the first reason is so that we can, what's the word I'm looking for? Evaluate, so that we can evaluate arguments critically. Studying fallacies equips you with the tools that you need to be able to identify flaws in reasoning, making it easier to evaluate the strength and validity of arguments. Whether engaging in academic debates, analysing political speeches, or navigating everyday discussions, understanding fallacies helps you discern between arguments that are logically sound and those that rely on faulty reasoning. This critical evaluation fosters informed decision-making and enhances intellectual integrity. Another reason why we study fallacies is so that we can avoid making errors in our own reasoning. It's one thing to be able to spot it in the things that other people are saying, the arguments that other people are making, and it's another thing entirely to be able to spot it when we're doing it ourselves. So understanding fallacies is essential for reflecting on and improving your own thought processes. By recognizing common mistakes in reasoning, you can avoid pitfalls like overgeneralization, false analogies, or appeals to emotion rather than logic. And this self-awareness not only strengthens your arguments, but also builds your credibility as a rational and thoughtful communicator. And the final reason why we study, that we're going to look at together, about why we study fallacies is so that we can recognize manipulation and misinformation, which has never been more important. We live in an age where we are constantly flooded with information on a daily basis. We're all connected to the internet all of the time. We're all on social media. We all get news and so on and so forth. So we are bombarded with information all the time. And fallacies are often used intentionally in rhetoric to manipulate opinions or spread misinformation. So by studying fallacies, you become more adept at identifying when someone is using tactics like strawman arguments, slippery slopes, or ad hominem attacks to distort the truth. This skill is particularly crucial, as I already said, in an age of mass media and social platforms where misleading information can easily spread and cause a great deal of harm. Recognizing these tactics helps you to maintain a clear perspective and, perhaps much more importantly, resist undue influence. So imagine, if you will, that someone says this product must be great because everyone is buying it. What's wrong with this reasoning? Well, think about it. This person has said this product must be great because everyone is buying. What is it that is? What does that infer? Well, when you think about it, the thing that it infers is that, well, basically it makes an assumption that popularity is somehow going to equate to quality, which isn't necessarily true. In fact, it's hardly ever true, let's face it. So that's a big problem with that statement. This product must be great because everyone's buying it. Well, that's a fallacy. Just because it's popular doesn't mean it's good. And we see things like that all the time in media and marketing, but also in our own reasoning when we're thinking about buying something. How often do we have the thought, oh, well, it's really popular, everyone's using it, everyone's buying it, it must be good, I'll buy it. I mean, it happens all the time, right? But as I say, there's a fallacy built into that, an assumption that popularity equates to quality, which is obviously hardly ever true. So at this point, what I want you to do is I want you to think of a time when you were persuaded by an argument that turned out to be flawed. What was it in that argument that made it convincing? So pause the video and jump in the comments and let me know, because that, I think, is a good way to round off this section about what is a logical fallacy. So pause the video and jump in the comments and let me know. So that question again was to think of a time when you were persuaded by an argument that turned out to be flawed. What was it in that argument that made it convincing? So pause the video, jump in the comments, share with the group, and then come back. So, did you pause the video and put your answer in there about what was it about that argument that made it convincing? I hope so, because it's important that you do these things, because it does help to solidify your knowledge, and beyond just remembering the things that I'm saying to you, it kind of forces you to use that information in a creative way, that means that it's not just, for lack of a better way of putting it, it's not just data and it's not just stuff in your head. It's actually something that you can use, a thought process that you can use. So that's why we do these exercises. So now that we have talked briefly about what are logical fallacies, we can move on and we can look at some common fallacies in reasoning. And for this, I actually have some slides, so bear with me just a moment. Right, so identifying logical fallacies is the overall sort of topic, and we are going to look at some common fallacies that are found in reasoning. So the first one we're going to look at is an ad hominem. So ad hominem attacks target the person making the argument rather than the argument itself. So there's an example on the slide. You can't trust his argument about climate change. He's not a scientist. So in this one, and there is a question for this that we'll come to at the end, but in this example, you can see that point that I made about ad hominem attacks targeting the person rather than the argument itself. So in this argument, you can see that where it says, you can't trust his argument about climate change. He's not a scientist. At no point in that is his argument about climate change actually mentioned or refuted. It is an attack on the person and not the argument itself. So let's think about some more examples. As the ad hominem fallacy is something we see on an almost daily basis. It presents itself in a variety of ways, but the end result is always the same. It's the person who comes under attack, not the idea. So to put that into some kind of reasonable perspective, I've got 3 ad hominems that are essentially different flavors of the same ice cream. So the first one is a personal insult. So person A says, I believe climate change has let me try that again. Person A says, I believe climate change is a significant issue that requires immediate action. And person B says, why should we listen to you? You're not even a scientist. So as you can see, this example is pretty similar to the one on the slide. And just like the one on the slide, instead of addressing the argument about climate change, person B attacks the credibility of person A by focusing on their profession, which is, of course, irrelevant to the argument itself. Another example of the ad hominem is a character attack. So person A says something like, we should increase funding for public education to improve student outcomes. And person B says, of course you'd say that. You're just trying to get re-elected. So in this example, person B dismisses the argument by questioning person A's motives instead of engaging with the reasoning behind increasing funding for education. So that's a character attack. And another sort of version or variant of the ad hominem is guilt by association. So person A says, I think we should consider universal health care. And person B responds with, you know who else supported universal health care? Totalitarian regimes. That's who. So in this example, person B attacks the argument by associating it with something negative, i.e. totalitarian regimes, rather than addressing the merits of universal health care. So that's ad hominems in a nutshell, so to speak. So let's go back to the one on the slide, which was you can't trust his argument about climate change. He's not a scientist. Why is this, the ad hominem on the slide, why is this a fallacy? So what I want you to do is pause the video and jump in the comments and answer that question. Why is this a fallacy? So pause the video and then come right back. Did you pause the video? Well, I hope so. And I look forward to reading your answers. So the statement on the slide, you can't trust his argument about climate change, he's not a scientist, is a fallacy because it dismisses the argument based on the person and not the content of the argument itself. Simple enough, right? So I think that's enough to get a good idea about what an ad hominem is and how we can spot those when they are happening. So now we can move on to another really common fallacy that we see, on a daily basis, and that's the strawman fallacy. So the strawman fallacy misrepresents someone's argument to make it easier to attack. So on the excuse me. So on the slide we have an example of a straw man fallacy. So we have the original argument, or person A, and they said we should regulate social media to reduce misinformation. And the straw man version of that argument is you want to shut down free speech. So that, as we can see, is a misrepresentation of the original argument, which I think is simple enough. So there are some variations of the straw man. Like all things, it comes in different flavors, as it were. So let's have a look at some of those variants. So we're going to start with oversimplification. So person A says we should focus on reducing waste by encouraging recycling programs. And person B says, oh, so you think recycling alone is going to solve all of our environmental problems? That's unrealistic. So in this example, person B misrepresents person A's argument by oversimplifying it into an extreme position that person A never claimed. So that's oversimplification. Another example of the straw man fallacy is exaggeration. So person A says, I think we should regulate social media companies to reduce the spread of misinformation. And person B says, so you want the government to control everything we say online. That's a violation of free speech. As you can probably tell, this one is very similar to the one on the slide. The one on the slide is also an exaggeration. So in this example, person B exaggerates person A's argument into an extreme stance, just like in the one in the slide. And that extreme stance in this example is government censorship. And that in itself is a mischaracterization of the original suggestion of regulating misinformation. And another version of or variant of the straw man fallacy to look out for is the distortion. So person A says we need to consider reforms to our current healthcare system to make it more affordable. And person B says you just want to completely dismantle the healthcare system and replace it with socialism. So in this example, person B distorts person A's argument by portraying it as a call for radical change, i.e. dismantling the system and adopting socialism, rather than addressing the proposed reforms to improve affordability. So I think now that we've gone through that, you should have a reasonable idea about the straw man fallacy, and there are probably things that come to mind immediately, examples, real world examples that come to mind immediately when you think about this. So what I want you to do is write a brief example of a straw man fallacy based on a real or hypothetical argument, and I want you to put that in the comments. So write a brief example of a straw man fallacy based on a real or hypothetical argument. So pause the video and post that in the comments, and I very much look forward to reading them. So, did you pause the video? I hope so, and I look forward to reading your straw man arguments in the comments. So now that we have examined the straw man fallacy, we can move on to the false dilemma. So a false dilemma, or the false dilemma fallacy, presents only two options when more exist. It splits everything into a binary decision rather than a multiple choice, so to speak. So We have an example of a false dilemma on the slide. So have a read of it. It says either we ban all guns or we let everyone have unrestricted access. So for the moment, I don't want you to think too deeply about that particular one, but just notice how this statement makes it an either or. It makes it a strict binary decision. But there are some variants of the false dilemma that are sort of commonly found in the world. And one of those is oversimplifying options. So an example of that would be where person A says, we need to address climate change by reducing carbon emissions. And person B says, we either keep using fossil fuels or shut down the economy. There's no middle ground. So in this example, person B presents a false choice, ignoring the many intermediate solutions such as transitioning gradually to renewable energy sources. Another example of the false dilemma is something that we call forcing a choice. So person A will say, we should consider funding for arts education in schools. And person B says, so you think we should fund arts education instead of maths and science? We can't afford both. So in this example, as we can see, it's been broken down into a strict binary choice, which is obviously not the case, not really, useful in the world. So person B creates a false dilemma by framing the issue as that sort of binary either or decision, which excludes the possibility of supporting both arts and STEM education. And another variant of the false dilemma is found in moral absolutes. So when person A says, we should provide aid to people experiencing homelessness, and person B responds with, either you support giving them everything they want for free or you don't care about homelessness, we have an example of a false dilemma, because person B has simplified the complex issue into an extreme binary choice, ignoring nuanced approaches like structured assistance programs or community support initiatives and so on. So now that we have explored to some extent the false dilemma, let's go back to the one on the slide. So either we ban all guns or we let everyone have unrestricted access. So what could be missing from this that would make it no longer a fallacy? So as you can see, we have that extreme binary either or situation going on. Either we ban all guns or we let everyone have unrestricted access. So we have that binary either or situation. So what's missing? What would make this a sensible thing to say? So pause the video and jump in the comments and let me know. Did you pause the video? And more importantly, have you put your answer in the comments? Well, I hope so. So what is missing here in this statement? Well, basically what's missing is a middle ground option, like regulated ownership or whatever. I'm sure there's a multitude of potential middle ground options that are in reality available. But in the argument, they've all been excluded because it's been forced into that extreme binary choice. So the thing that's missing is a middle ground option, something like regulated ownership or whatever, something like that. So that's the false dilemma. And actually it's quite a simple one to spot. Whenever you see something presented as a strict binary either or situation, you need to ask yourself whether that is actually whether they are actually the only available options. So that's the false dilemma. So now we can move on to an appeal to authority. So this one, we, again, like all of these, we see this constantly. So this fallacy, the appeal to authority, relies on the opinion of an authority figure who may not actually be qualified in in the particular instance of the statement they've made. So we have one on the slide on the screen right now, and it says a famous actor says this diet works, so it must be effective. And as we can see, there is an authority in there, and that's the famous actor. However, an actor is not a nutritionist. They're just not even remotely close to being the same thing. So the actor will be an authority in acting, but when it comes to nutrition and diet, they are not an authority. They're just some bloke or some woman or whatever. They're just another person. They're not an authority. They don't know any more or less than you do. There's no authority there whatsoever. The authority they hold as an actor does not logically transfer to nutrition. So therefore, this example, this appeal to authority is indeed a fallacy, because the authority in this instance really isn't an authority in the right field. So there are some variations of this appeal to authority. So one of those variations is what we call irrelevant authority. So person A says we should invest in renewable energy to combat climate change. And person B says, well, the famous actor said renewable energy isn't effective, so I don't think it's worth pursuing. And this example is very similar to the one on the slide. So all of those things that I said about the one on the slide, really, they apply here, because person B relies on the opinion of a celebrity who is not an expert in renewable energy. And they rely on that opinion rather than addressing the evidence or the arguments. So it becomes an irrelevant authority. Another version of the appeal to authority is very similar. They're all very similar, but it's a slight variant of it, and that's the unqualified authority. So person A says, I'm not sure about this new diet plan. Is it safe? And person B says, oh, it must be safe. The fitness influencer says it's the best thing ever. So person B appeals to the fitness influencer's opinion about the subject without verifying if they have the necessary qualifications or expertise in nutrition or health. And let's face it, most influencers in any field don't really have a great deal of qualification or expertise in most of what they say. So we see this all the time. So that's the unqualified authority. And another version of the appeal to authority is what we call misplaced authority. So person A says, this historical event has been debated by historians for years. And person B says, well, my dentist says that historians are wrong, so I trust them instead. So in this example, person B relies on the opinion of the dentist, who is an authority in dental care for sure, but not in history, which in turn makes the appeal irrelevant to the topic at hand. So we call that misplaced authority. So now I have a question for you. a little activity, as it were. Why might appealing to an unqualified authority seem convincing? So I want you to pause the video and jump in the comments and respond to that. Why might appealing to an unqualified authority seem convincing? So jump in the comments and let me know. So, did you pause the video and respond to that? Well, I hope so. So one of the things you might have thought of when trying to answer this question about why might appealing to an unqualified authority seem convincing is that the person, this unqualified authority, has already been elevated to a position of authority in our minds in some other field of endeavor or thought or whatever, and we end up transferring that authority across the board, which is obviously nonsense. No one's an expert in all things. That's just never the case. But because we perceive these people as experts or authorities in some particular field, we do have a tendency to abstract that and apply it across the board. So it feels like, it seems like it's convincing when we are on the receiving end of it. But it is important for us to recognize where the authority of this person begins and ends. So if it's an actor, their authority begins and ends with acting. If they're a dentist, their authority begins and ends with dental care. If they're a GP, a doctor, their authority begins and ends with healthcare, and so on. But when we elevate these people to a position of authority, it is quite natural for us to then essentially extend that authority outside of that person's relevant field. So that is one of the things you might have thought of when you were thinking about the question, why might appealing to an unqualified authority seem convincing? So now that we have looked at appeals to authority, we can move on to the false cause. So the sort of proper name for this is post hoc ergo propter hoc. And that is a right old mouthful. So I'm not going to call it that again. We're just going to stick with false cause. Otherwise, you'll have to listen to me stuttering and stammering for forever, just trying to get that out all the time. So the false cause fallacy assumes that because one event followed another, the first caused the second. So think about the phrase that we hear so often, correlation is not causation. So we have on the screen, on the slide, an example of a false cause fallacy. And it says, I wore my lucky socks and we won the game. My socks caused the win. So think about that. And remember, a false cause is a fallacy that assumes that because one event followed the other, the first caused the second. So think about that that statement on the slide. We will get to a question about that in a moment, but before we do, I am going to go through a couple of different sort of variants of the false cause fallacy. So the first variant is superstition. So person A says, every time I wear my lucky shoes, our team wins the game. And person B says, that's great, you should wear them all season. So in this example, person A assumes that wearing the shoes causes the team to win, even though there is no causal connection between the shoes and the team's performance. And if you've ever been to a Premier League football match, you will see many people or you will meet many people in those enormous crowds of people that are engaging in this false cause fallacy in exactly that way. They'll be wearing their lucky socks, their lucky shoes, their lucky whatever. So it's obviously nonsense. There's no actual causation between the lucky shoes and the team winning the game. None whatsoever. But nonetheless, we make that sort of superstitious inference, that false cause. Another example of the false cause fallacy is something we call faulty policy logic. An example of that would be person A says the city installed more streetlights and crime rates dropped soon after. And person B says, well, that proves streetlights eliminate crime. So in this example, while the decrease in crime coincided with the installation of streetlights, other factors such as increased police patrols may have caused a reduction in crime. The conclusion assumes causation without evidence. Another example of the false cause fallacy is in health assumptions. So person A says something like, I started taking this new vitamin and I haven't gotten sick since. So person B responds with, that means that vitamin is keeping you healthy. Now in this example, the improvement in health may have occurred for unrelated reasons, such as like a stronger immune system or lack of exposure to illness or any number of things. And as a result, assuming that the vitamin is the sort of direct cause of that improvement in health is an example of the false cause fallacy. So let's go back to the fallacy on the slide, which was, I wore my lucky socks and we won the game. My socks caused the win. So what is a more plausible explanation for the win? And why is it a fallacy? So pause the video and jump in the comments with your answer. So what's a more plausible explanation for the win? And why is this on the slide a fallacy? So pause the video and then come right back. Did you pause the video? And more importantly, answer my question. I certainly hope so. So let's have a think about it. So the first part of the question was, what's a more plausible explanation for the win? So let's think about like a football team, right? So you go and watch your favorite football team. You're wearing your lucky socks, and your favorite football team. You're in the audience wearing your lucky socks, and the team you support, they won. Does it really have anything to do with your socks? Well, let's face it, probably not. In fact, it probably has nothing to do with you at all. So what was it then? Well, maybe the team you support are having, they're having a good day. They're working well together as a team. They're scoring goals. They're passing well and defending well and attacking well and so on. And maybe the other team are just rubbish. There are many plausible explanations for this, and none of those plausible explanations involve your lucky socks. So why is this a fallacy? Well, as we've already sort of pointed out, there is no discernible There is no discernible sort of chain of causality between wearing your lucky socks and your favourite team winning the game. None at all. So that's, that's why it's a fallacy, and some examples of a more sort of plausible explanation for the win. So now we can move on to begging the question, or as it's sort of more commonly called, circular reasoning. So let me change the slide. There we go. So this fallacy, begging the question or circular reasoning, assumes that let me try that again. It assumes the conclusion within its premises. So we have on the screen an example of begging the question. We know ghosts are real because many people have seen them. So I'm going to give you a couple of different sort of variants of this fallacy in action, and then after we've gone through that, I've got a question about the one on the slide, but I'm going to go through these sort of examples, these variants first, because then the question at the other end of this will be really easy to answer. So an example of begging the question can be found in religious belief, or often purported by religious believers. So person A says something like, the Bible is true because it's the word of God. And person B responds with, how do you know it's the word of God? And person A says, because the Bible says so. And this argument assumes the truth of its conclusion, i.e. that the Bible is the word of God, as evidence for the premise, which creates a circular reasoning loop. Another example when we see begging the question is in political claims. So person A says a democracy is the best form of government because democratic nations are better. And person B says, why are democratic nations better? And person A responds with, because they have democracy. So this argument assumes the conclusion as part of the reasoning rather than providing independent evidence. So if you remember, the conclusion was that democracy is superior. So it assumes that conclusion as part of the reasoning rather than actually providing any form of independent and indeed verifiable evidence. Another example of the circular reasoning fallacy, the begging the question fallacy, is in moral assertions. So person A says lying is wrong because it's immoral to lie. And person B says, why is it immoral to lie? And person A says, because it's wrong. So in this example, the argument restates the conclusion, i.e. that lying is wrong, as its own justification and offering no external support for the claim. So let's go back to the one on the slide. We know ghosts are real because many people have seen them. What is the assumption that's embedded in this example? Have a think about it. So we know ghosts are real because many people have seen them. So what's the assumption in this example? So pause the video, jump in the comments and answer that question for me. What is the assumption in this example? Did you pause the video? And more importantly, did you put your answer in the comments? I certainly hope so. So in this example, which is we know ghosts are real because many people have seen them, the assumption that's embedded in that example is that eyewitness accounts in some way, shape or form prove reality. So the problem with that is that's just not true. Memory is not nearly as objective as we'd like to think it is. nor is it anywhere near as reliable as we'd like to think of it being. And also, we are capable, if not prone, to at times see things and spot patterns and so on that aren't really there. How many times have you seen um a coat hung over the back of a chair in your bedroom, and it's dark, it's the middle of the night, and you just glance over the room and it looks like someone's sitting there? Happens all the time. It does to me. And other than making me jump out of my skin, my brain is attempting to fill the gaps. It's not quite sure how to process the information it's receiving, so it does a lot of a fair amount of sort of inference and so on. So as a result, it creates this image of a person sitting in the chair just creepily staring at you while you're in bed. And then as soon as you turn on the light and you see that actually it's just your coat or whatever on the chair, and there isn't a person there, there's nothing there, it becomes it becomes clear that our senses and our and how we process that data isn't always objective, and it isn't always an accurate representation of reality. So now that we have thought about the circular reasoning fallacy, or the begging the question fallacy, we can move on to slippery slopes. So the slippery slope fallacy claims that taking one action will inevitably lead to an extreme and undesirable outcome without providing evidence for such a progression. So we have one on the screen right now on the slide. I'm going to read it out to you, and then we're going to go through some examples, and then I've got a question for you about the one on the slide. So the one on the slide says, if we allow students to use calculators, they'll never learn math, and our education system will collapse. So if you remember from literally about a second ago, the slippery slope fallacy claims that taking one action will inevitably lead to an extreme and undesirable outcome without providing any evidence for such a progression. So there are some variants of the slippery slope fallacy that we'll see and experience all the time. So one of those is what we see in social policy. So person A says we should legalize medical cannabis for patients who need it. And person B says or responds with, if we legalize medical cannabis, next people will demand to legalize all drugs, and soon society will be overrun with drug addicts. And in this example, person B assumes that one step, i.e. legalizing medical cannabis, will inevitably lead to extreme consequences without providing evidence for this progression. We've all seen this fallacy in action. But another sort of variant of the slippery slope fallacy is something we see in technology adoption. And this example is actually quite similar to the one on the slide in some ways. So in this example, person A says we should allow students to use calculators during exams, and person B responds with, if we let them use calculators, next they'll be using computers, and eventually they won't learn math at all. So in this example, person B jumps to an unlikely and unsupported conclusion, assuming that allowing calculators will lead to a complete abandonment of learning maths. And that's obviously, utter nonsense. So that's that fallacy in action, as it were. And another example of the slippery slope is something we see in cultural change. So person A says we should allow more lenient dress codes at work. And person B says, if we relax the dress code, soon people will come to work in pajamas, and the next thing you know, nobody will take their job seriously. So in this example, person B exaggerates the potential consequences of a relaxed dress code, assuming an unlikely chain of events without any evidence. So now let's go back to the one on the slide. If we allow students to use calculators, they'll never learn math and our education system will collapse. This reasoning is quite clearly flawed. But why is it flawed? So I want you to pause the video and jump in the comments and answer that question. Why is this reasoning flawed? So pause the video, go and answer in the comments, and then come back here. Did you pause the video? Did you answer? I hope so. So in this example, if we allow students to use calculators, they'll never learn math and our education system will collapse. There is a flaw to this reasoning. And that flaw is that it exaggerates the consequences without any evidence whatsoever to support the claim. So it's simple enough, right? That's the slippery slope. That is something that is quite common in basically every field of human endeavor. But if you go online and you look at some media, they will use this all the time. If you do X, then Y and Z will happen. And it's so common, and it's actually used a lot of the time to frighten people, to make them worry, and also to get in the way of them thinking critically and logically about something. So that's the slippery slope. So let's move on to appeals to tradition. Let me just change the slide. So the appeal to tradition fallacy is it argues that something must be good or true just because it's been done or believed for a long time. So there's an example on the slide. This medicine must work because it's been used for centuries. This is a prime example of the appeal to tradition. As you can see from this argument, there's no evidence or anything to support the claim that the medicine must work. The only reason they've included about why it must work is that it's been used for centuries. But we all know that something could be used for centuries and actually not work for that entire time. We all know that. So that is an appeal to tradition. It's an error in reasoning. And there are some variations to the appeal to tradition, or some common examples of it. So we see it in workplace practices where person A says we should adopt a more flexible work from home policy, and person B says we've always worked in the office and it's worked fine for years. Why change now? Person B argues against the change solely because working in the office is the traditional way, without considering whether a flexible policy could be beneficial. And also, in this example, person B could have instead argued against a flexible work from home policy with some actual data, some actual evidence to support that actually working in the office is better in whatever capacity. But there was none of that. Instead, they appealed to tradition. They said, we've always worked in the office and it's worked fine for years, so why change now? Another example is found in cultural norms. The person A says, we should reconsider how we celebrate this holiday to make it more inclusive. And person B says, why? We've celebrated it this way for generations. It's part of our heritage. And in this example, person B justifies continuing the tradition without addressing whether the current practice might exclude or harm others. Another example of an appeal to tradition is in education methods. So person A says, let's integrate more technology into the classroom to enhance learning. And person B says, we don't need technology. Our traditional teaching methods have worked for decades. In this example, person B resists incorporating new methods based purely on the tradition of using older methods without evaluating if the technology might actually improve education. So now I have a question for you. And I want you to pause the video and jump in the comments to answer this question. So why let me try that again. Why is it that relying on tradition doesn't necessarily make something valid? So why is it when we rely on tradition that it... stuttering and stammering all over the place. So why... I'll try that again. So why is it that relying on tradition doesn't necessarily make something valid? So jump in the comments and answer that. And I look forward to reading those responses. And when you return in just a moment, we will move on to thinking about some real world examples. So, did you pause the video? Well, I hope so. So, now that we have looked at some of the common the common fallacies, and there are a lot more logical fallacies around. I could do a video that's many hours long going through all of these, but I don't want to keep you forever, and it's already been, I actually have no idea, maybe an hour already. So let's keep the wheels moving, keep the dice rolling, as it were. So now we can start to examine some real world examples to see how fallacies appear in everyday life. So we see ad hominem attacks in politics all the time. So on the slide we have, he's unfit for office because he dresses poorly. This is an example of an ad hominem attack in politics. And oops, I didn't mean to do that, sorry. And an example, a couple more examples of ad hominem attacks in politics could be like a character attack during a debate. So candidate A says, we need to reform the tax system to make it fairer to the middle class. And candidate B says, how can we trust you on taxes when your personal finances are a mess? And in this example, instead of addressing the argument about tax reform, candidate B attacks candidate A's personal financial management, which is actually irrelevant to the policy proposal. Another example of the ad hominem attacks in politics is like smearing opponents in campaigns. So politician A says, I believe we should invest more in renewable energy to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels. And politician B says, you can't trust their opinion. They're just a rich elitist out of touch with ordinary people. And in this example, politician B dismisses politician A's argument about renewable energy by attacking their socio-economic status rather than addressing the merits of the policy. So let's move on to appeals to authority in advertising. So on the slide we have 9 out of 10 people prefer this toothpaste. So if you remember from when we talked about appeals to authority, we are essentially equating popularity, or incorrectly equating popularity to quality. So let's think about some more examples of appeals to popularity in advertising. This fallacy is often called the bandwagon fallacy as well. I don't know if I said that before or not, but we often call it the bandwagon fallacy. So let's think about a fashion advertisement. So the ad copy says, join the millions who are already wearing the hottest trainers of the year, or sneakers if you're American. Everyone's doing it. Don't get left behind. So this ad, okay, it's not a very good ad. As a marketing man myself, I'd never put out such a lame ad, but it's a good example nonetheless. So this ad suggests that the popularity of the trainers, or sneakers if you're American, is a sufficient reason to buy them, rather than providing evidence for their quality, their comfort, their value, or whatever. And let's think about the bandwagon fallacy in like a tech product promotion. So the ad copy says something like, 9 out of 10 people prefer this smartphone. Shouldn't you? So this ad appeals to the product's popularity to persuade buyers, implying that the majority's preference automatically makes it the best choice, without actually offering any specific reasons for its superiority. So the thing with the bandwagon fallacy is that essentially the aim of it is to feel like you're sort of missing out. And that's why advertisers love it. 9 out of 10 people prefer this smartphone. Shouldn't you? It triggers what we call in the marketing world FOMO, fear of missing out. And it is, rather annoyingly, quite an effective advertising strategy. It's not one I'm particularly fond of, but it is nonetheless extremely effective. And think about it in natural language. When you're having, your regular day-to-day conversations, you will see this appeal to authority, this bandwagon fallacy, all the time. So it's something that you really do need to look out for, because, as we've already sort of pointed out, popularity does not in any way, shape, or form correlate to quality. So now let's think about some false cause fallacies in health claims. So on the slide we have a claim, and it says people who eat more chocolate live longer. Chocolate must be the key to longevity. Now, well, first and foremost, if this was actually true, because it's obviously not, because it's a false cause, but if this was actually true, I'd basically be immortal, because I love chocolate. But I'm not. I know I'm not. So there is no causation between eating more chocolate and living longer. It's just a coincidence, essentially. And so it's a dangerous claim as a result. but there are an almost infinite number of examples we could pull off out of the real world of this cause fallacy in health claims. So let's think about some others. So imagine for a moment you come across a company that are they make supplements, right? So in this instance, they're making a weight loss supplement. So it's a diet supplement claim. So the advertisement states, I started taking this weight loss supplement and I lost 20 pounds in 2 months. It must be the supplement. So in this example, the ad assumes the supplement caused the weight loss, ignoring the other possible and extremely likely factors like changes in diet or exercise or metabolism. So this is another dangerous claim that's bandied around quite a lot. So in my marketing work, I've been approached a few times by companies who want me to create advertising for them for their weight loss supplements, and I always refuse because they are all mostly utter nonsense. So as a result, in order to sell that product, I would have to engage in this false cause fallacy, and I'm not personally comfortable doing that. I'm sure more sort of unscrupulous marketers and advertisers would be fine with that, but I'm not. And there are many companies out there pushing these products, and they've got people saying, "Yeah, I started taking this product and I lost loads of weight. Must be this product." But in reality, it basically never is. That person that's lost all the weight, if they're being truthful about having lost weight in the first place, it's generally because they have been exercising more, they have been eating better, and that as a result, their metabolism has improved. And the actual supplement itself is at best a placebo. So it's quite a dangerous claim because somebody could take that supplement but not exercise, not improve their diet, and so on, and actually run into more and more problems. So it's a really dangerous claim, and it's one you really need to look out for. Another example of false cause fallacy in health claims is seen in alternative medicine testimonials. So before I do this, I just want to say I'm not against alternative medicines in any way, shape, or form, but a lot of them are nonsense. So yeah, but that's just a bit of a disclaimer, really. So imagine for a moment a testimonial. So it's for a herbal remedy for like headaches. So the testimonial says, after using this herbal remedy, my chronic headaches went away. It's proof that this remedy works. So this testimonial assumes the remedy cured the headaches without actually considering other possible explanations, such as the natural resolution of the issue or a placebo effect. So that's the false cause, specifically in health claims, but obviously it transfers into, all other claims really. So at this point, it would be a good idea to have a go at identifying some false causes in the world. So go online or open a newspaper. Do people read newspapers anymore? I don't know. I'm not sure. I haven't read a newspaper in about a decade, so I'm not sure. So go online or whatever and have a look at some articles and some adverts and so on, and try and identify some of these potential fallacies, and not just the false cause fallacy, but all of the fallacies that we've looked at. So to go back through that list, there is the ad hominem fallacy or the ad hominem attacks, the Strawman fallacy. So the ad hominem is like an attack on the person rather than the argument. Strawman fallacy is where you misrepresent someone's argument to make it easier to attack. The false dilemma fallacy presents only two options. It makes it an extreme binary choice when in reality more options exist. And we have the appeal to authority, which is where this fallacy sort of relies on the opinion of an authority figure who probably isn't qualified. And we also have the false cause fallacy. So that's what we've just been talking about. So this fallacy assumes that because one event followed another, the first caused the second. There is the begging the question, or the circular reasoning fallacy, which is where the fallacy assumes the conclusion within the premise. And we also have the slippery slope fallacy, which is where a claim is made that taking one action will inevitably lead to like an extreme and undesirable outcome without actually providing any evidence for that rapid progression, that rapid and extreme progression. And we also have the appeal to tradition fallacy, which argues that something must be good or true just because it's been done or believed for a long time. So yeah, have a think about or let me try that again. So go and look at some articles and some adverts and so on, and try and identify some of these fallacies in action. So if you want to pause the video, do some Google Kung Fu and find some of those examples, and then come back here in the comments and post your examples and let us know exactly what fallacy is present in that example. So, did you pause the video and do that? It would be wonderful if you did, but if you didn't, then please make a note of it and do it later. So, let's have a practice at identifying some fallacies. So this first fallacy we have on the screen: we shouldn't trust her opinion on the economy because she failed math in school. What kind of fallacy is this? So that statement again is we shouldn't trust her opinion on the economy because she failed math in school. So what is the fallacy in this statement? Have a think about it. What's going on here? Well, as we can see, the person whose opinion we shouldn't trust, none of their ideas are actually refuted. There's no argument against the ideas of that person's opinion in any way, shape, or form. All we see is an attack on the person instead. So the answer, of course, is that this is an ad hominem. And then we have another fallacy. Either you're with us or you're against us. So what is this fallacy? What is the fallacy present in this statement? Either you're with us or you're against us. What is going on here? Have a think about it. So this, if you have a think about it, you will see that what you're seeing here is a binary choice. Essentially, you're putting to an extreme position where you have to be with us or against us. There is no middle ground present in this statement. There is no either you're with us or you're against us, or you are with us in some capacity and against us in others. There is no middle ground there. It's just you're with us or you're against us. It is a strict binary choice, and as we know, in the real world, there are very rarely such strict binary choices. So what we have here is a false dilemma. And we have another example. So what kind of fallacy, if any at all, is present in this statement? If we allow students to use calculators, they'll never learn math and their education system will collapse. Now, if you think back, well, I know it's been a long video so far, so forgive me for that. But if you think back, we've actually covered exactly this one already. We've seen it already. We've heard it already. If we allow students to use calculators, they'll never learn math and our education system will collapse. So what do we have, or what can we see in that statement? Well, one of the things that we can see is that there is an escalation of consequences that is rapid and extreme. But that escalation of consequences has no actual sort of evidence to support it. So the answer to the question, what kind of fallacy is present, is, well, if you said a slippery slope, then you would be absolutely correct. So well done. And one more practice example. Oh, so what fallacy is present, if any at all, in this statement? This medicine must work because it's been used for centuries. And again, we've seen this. In fact, all of these fallacies I'm giving you right now, we've actually seen these all the way through this video already. So what's going on here? Well, we can see, obviously, there's this idea that this medicine should work, and the reason that's given for why this medicine must be effective, why it must work, is because, and only because, it's been used for a long time. Despite the fact that it could have been used for a long time and not worked even once that entire time. So, of course, what we have here is an appeal to tradition. So well done to all of you that got that. And at this point, it would be a good idea, I think, for you to write your own fallacy example and chuck it in the comments. And it would be good for us all. But it would be most beneficial to you. Let me just get rid of these slides. Most beneficial to you because it will help to solidify your understanding and further cement all the ideas that we have worked through in this hour and, I don't know, 10, 20 minutes, something like that video. So pause the video and post in the comments your own example, your own fallacy example. And also, if you have a moment to do so, go and have a look at some other people's examples as well, because it's often quite illuminating to see the way that other people think about these things and the conclusions they come to, and as a result, the answers that they're going to give to this task. So write a fallacy of your own, or an example, a fallacy example of your own. So pause the video and go and do that. And we're nearly done, I promise. So, did you pause the video? And more importantly, did you create your own fallacy example and post it in the comments? I hope so. I look forward to reading them. It's going to be an interesting experience for us all. So logical fallacies are everywhere. And that cannot be overstated. They are literally everywhere, all of the time. And we see it from like casual conversations to between you and friends, or the people you care about, all the way up to the sort of highly impersonal political debates and so on. We see it in our education, in our work, in the activities we do, and so on and so forth. Anytime that there is communication between human beings, there is an enormous potential for logical fallacies to be present. So learning to recognize them empowers you to think critically and avoid errors in your reasoning and challenge flawed arguments. So before we part ways, I would like you to, well, I have one more sort of activity for you. And what I want you to do is write a short paragraph answering the following question. What fallacy do you encounter most often, and how do you plan to address it when you see it in the future? And it doesn't have to be one of the fallacies we've covered here. There are, as I say, there are many fallacies out there. So do some Google Kung Fu, as it were, if you want to pick something that's outside of the quite short list of fallacies that we worked through. I didn't want to include more. I may do another video in the future with some more sort of fallacies and examples, but I didn't want to include more at this point because it's already, well, we're already well over an hour at this point. So yeah, write a short paragraph about what fallacies you encounter most often and how you are planning to address it when you see it in the future. So post that in the comments, and I really look forward to reading those. And in the next video, we're going to focus on critical thinking in practice. We're going to be evaluating evidence and hopefully working to avoid cognitive biases. So I hope to see you there. But before we part ways, I would like to ask if you wouldn't mind at all liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and all that good stuff. Now, obviously, this benefits me. I'm not going to pretend like it doesn't. It absolutely does. But more importantly, and this is actually the only reason you should do it, because whether it benefits me or not is, quite frankly, irrelevant to you in your life. So don't ever let anyone make you feel like it is relevant to your life, because it's just not. So, but the only real reason in it for you to like the video and subscribe to the channel is that not only does that tell YouTube that you want to see more of my stuff, thank you for that, that's wonderful. But more importantly, it tells YouTube that you are interested in the subject of philosophy, and therefore YouTube's magical algorithm will work to put more creators in front of you that are talking about these ideas, which will broaden your perspective and your horizons, as it were, and it will mean that you are not limited to one interpretation of the ideas, which means that you are getting you're essentially, you'll get more data which will enable you to refine your worldview and think more critically and so on and so forth. So it's definitely of benefit to do that. So if you could do that, that would be wonderful. But it's totally no pressure. So if it's not something you want to do, that's fine too. So thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one, where we, as I already said, we're going to focus on critical thinking in practice. So thank you very much, and I will see you on the next one.